Welcome to Green Dot Daily, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. Make sure you are subscribed. I'm Maria Marino, and later in the show, we'll preview the NHL West Final between the Oilers and Stars. We'll also have plenty of NBA, and make sure you follow along because we're going to be building a same-game parlay for Pacers Celtics Game 2 throughout this show. But first, got to talk about Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals last night. Dallas was a 4.5-point road dog, but managed to beat Minnesota 108-105 as Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving combined for 63 points. Before the game, Dallas was plus 140 or so to win the series. Prices have now flipped, with Dallas becoming the favorite. As we welcome Brandon Anderson to the show. A heartbreaker last night, at least if you're Minnesota. What is your reaction and key takeaway from that Game 1?
Yeah, heartbreaker for Timberwolves fans like myself, but I thought an instant classic, right? Like back and forth, really close game. Neither team really ever got too far ahead. And really, I thought this played out like a classic post-Game 7 spot. We talked a lot about that going in. And what do? We get to the fourth quarter. Timberwolves give up a 13-0 run, lots of Luka Doncic. Then they fight back, 13-1 Minnesota, then 10-3 to close. And I thought Anthony Edwards was exhausted down the stretch. Kyrie kind of called him out after the game, mentioned how Ant called him out after Game 7, how Kyrie would be guarded by him. Kyrie put up 24 in the first half. And I thought that really wore Anthony Edwards down in the late part of the game. Denver, that altitude, the Game 7 effects, I think we saw that play out. We got a tired defense since 2014 now. Favored home seed coming off of Game 7 like Minnesota was, 5-9 straight up. So this is a thing we've seen play out. And I think it is a little bit worrisome for Minnesota because really, they got the outlier game. Jaden McDaniels, 6 of 9 threes. Kyle Anderson, 11 first half points. Dallas shoots 24% on threes. They're probably not going to shoot that poorly again. This is the game Minnesota should have won. They almost sort of stole it back late, but I thought the Timberwolves tried a lot defensively. I don't know if that a lot worked. They gave up 73% twos in the first half. They tried a lot of drop late against Luka. That wasn't working. He carved them up. I thought Rudy Gobert was really good. He was plus 10. Timberwolves lost by 3 so it didn't work well. When he came off, Derek Lively was huge. Plus 19 in his minutes. I think his energy and finding some answer to that is important for Minnesota. But I mean, you got to win this one now. You can't go down 0-2 at home. You can't do that. It's a backs against the wall spot for the Timberwolves for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a big challenge when you have both Luka and Kyrie hot. And, this time we saw a little bit of a flip script where Kyrie was sort of leading the way and then Luka was just, well, whatever else we need down the stretch here. But that could easily go the other way. We've seen a lot of times Kyrie deferring to Luka first. But either way, you're kind of cooked. You sort of alluded to this. This is backs against the wall for Game 2. Does that mean you're going Wolves?
It does. I think this is a great spot to back the Timberwolves in Game 2. This is not a bet with my heart. This is a bet. I got trends for you, Maria.
Of course
Teams
you do.
Coming off a Game 1 loss by more than 2 points. Minnesota just fit in there. Those teams are 44, 24, and 2 against the spread in Game 2 since 2004. So 65% cover rate. And just top 3 seeds like Minnesota, 39, 14, and 2 ATS, 74% hit rate. So that's a very strong spot to say, okay, look, you back the good team that blew a Game 1, but has to get it in Game 2. This is the spot. Hopefully Minnesota gets a little bit more chance to recover off of that Game 7. No rest for the weary here, but this number's already rising. I grabbed it at -4.5 as it came out in my article. I see a lot of 5s, even 5.5s now. So just best number that you can find. And I think regarding the series, if you like Minnesota, I think that's fine. This is a great chance for you to buy now where they're at. They're the underdog now. If you like Dallas, I think that's fine. You saw a lot of reasons to like Dallas. I think you missed your buy point for now. You wanted to buy before Game 1 in that Game 7 spot. So now I think you either need to wait for another spot, wait for this Minnesota bounce back spot, and then maybe you buy, or you just got to go in. You got to buy title odds. And I think that's the other way to do Dallas right now.
It just feels like this is a situation where Minnesota's, their playoff lives are truly on the line. Like if they go down 0-2, it just seems like, it's basically a must win. So I agree with you on the side here, and good point in terms of betting the series. Now let's switch gears. Game 2 between the Pacers and Celtics tonight. We are building a same game parlay here on GDD throughout the show. So Brandon Anderson, it's up to you to give the first leg of this parlay.
All right, well, let's start out with a winner. I'm going to go with Al Horford. Old man, give me the bombing threes, over 2.5 threes. It's plus 150, plus 140, somewhere in that range, depending where you're looking. My guy is bombing right now. We watched him close out the Cavs, 6 threes, 6 out of 13. And he comes out in game 1, keeps shooting 3 out of 12 in game 1. Now, I'm actually less interested in the 6 and the 3. The 13 and the 12 is what I want. Give me the volume. Give me those shots going up. And you watch, you see him. He's open and he is firing away. I think that's a strategic move by both teams, really. Boston wants to pull Miles Turner away from the basket. Indiana wants to say, go ahead, Al Horford. Go ahead, you beat us. We got other guys to defend here. We can't do everything. So Porzingis still out. Horford's really the only guy they've got in the middle. Luke Kornet minutes did not go well for Boston. So Horford's going to be out there. He's getting the shots up. If you do the math, Horford's about a 38% career three-point shooter. If we get even 7 attempts, the math says we got a better than 50-50 shot to hit 3. And we're getting plus money to hit 3 here. If we get 12 attempts, I don't know, we'll get 12 again. But if we do, we're more like 90% to hit this bet. So I think this number is way off. I honestly, Maria, I wondered if this would be a minus number or if they might even bump to over 3.5. That's how far off I think it is. If you want to go 4 threes or more, that's plus 380. You can bet him 9-1 to lead the game in threes. I don't mind either of those. You know, love my escalator, but for our same game parlay, Al Horford over 2.5 threes plus 150.
I love how in game 1 for the Pacers, Miles Turner showed his ability to stretch the floor. And then at the same time, Al Horford was like, yeah, I could do that too. It's cool. And you make just a great point about the volume. Really like those odds. Brandon Anderson, thank you so much for stopping by GDD.
Thanks, Maria.
Check out the most bet props for Pacers Celtics game 2. We got Jason Tatum under 5.5 assists. Miles Turner under 1.5 blocks, Andrew Nembhard under 4.5 assists, Pascal Siakam over 20.5 points, and Al Horford under 21.5 points, rebounds, and assists. As we bring in Brian Matthews. Okay, we got a good one tonight, and you have a few props for us. So let's get into it. What do you got?
All right, so I'm starting off with, a key bench player here. So I'm going to go first one. I'm going to go Obi Toppin over 8.5 points. So, I like this for many reasons. So you look back, starting back at the playoffs, including the Knicks series, he's covered this line in 7 of his last 10 games. And then if you go back and look specifically against the Boston Celtics, he has at least 10 points in his last 6 games against the Celtics. Actually, 11 plus points in all but one of those games. So this is a matchup that's higher scoring, faster paced than their last series with the Knicks. It's a matchup that suits Toppin's skill sets better, and he actually played 21 minutes last game, a little bit higher than what we're seeing from him. So, look, I love the fact that we're still getting this under 10, and that's something that he's done again in 6 straight games against the Celtics. So I'm going to keep backing Toppin until he proves me wrong.
Yeah, I think Toppin has been phenomenal. I mean, this entire postseason, he's been a spark. He hasn't been afraid of the moment. Had those 15 points in game 1. What else do you like?
All right, so I'm going to go back, and I used to do quite a bit or quite a few of these first quarter props. So, let's try it out. So I was looking at Drew Holiday, and look, there's so many things that I like about this matchup for Drew Holiday. I like his rebound assist line. I actually like his points line. So I was kind of trying to figure out which way to attack this. So I'm actually going to go Drew Holiday over 1.5 first quarter assists, and that's plus 180 over at DraftKings. And so when I look back over the last 4 games, and all of those were without Kristaps Porzingis, he's had at least 2 assists in all 4 games, but he's had at least 4 potential assists in his last 3 games. He's had 4, 3, and 3 first quarter assists. So This is a high-paced matchup I mentioned earlier. It's, you know, you're getting a nice pace here, and it's a matchup that Drew Holiday's excelled in. He's looking to get his teammates involved early, and at plus 180, I just love the fact that we're getting a great number at this. So I like this. I'm going to run the first quarter assist for Drew Holiday at 1.5.
Look at you, the deep dive on Drew Holiday. I mean, look, he played amazing in game one. I can't wait to see what he does here in game two. And by the way, just so everybody knows, BMAT has already logged a bunch of picks for Mavs Wolves game two, and those are in the Action app. So make sure you follow him, check those out. However, BMAT, I'm sure you've heard, we are building a same game parlay here on this show, and we need you to provide us with a leg. What is your pick for the SGP?
All right. So yeah, when I know some people, when they hear SGP, they're like, oh, wait, no, I love this. This is my territory. I am in. So look, let's just bump Obi Toppin up. I mentioned that he scored 10 plus points in his last 6 games against the Celtics. So especially when you're making an SGP, it's always nice to have a leg with plus odds, you know, just the correlation when, you know, the value comes out at the end and the odds you get. So let's go ahead and go Obi Toppin, 10 plus points, which is plus 125. And I'll go ahead and make that my official submission for game 2's SGP.
You already know I am a big fan of Obi Toppin. I like that leg. And now I am going to give a leg for the same game parlay as well. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
Whew, a little nervous, not gonna lie, but I'm going Pacers plus 9 here. I have to just go with my gut. I thought that this number just looked a little bit high for a team that had very little issue keeping up with the Celtics away from home in game one. You know, people keep talking about, oh, the Celtics, they're going to be so upset. They're going to come out strong in game two. They're going to want to erase that performance. Well, what do you think the Pacers are going to want to do after they were in complete control and then gave it away? I mean, they know what they need to clean up. They need to clean up those turnovers. And how about Tyrese Halliburton? Unlike the last 2 series that he was in, he started off well in game one. So he's not having to play catch up here in game two. And by the way, I know that twice in these playoffs, the Celtics have covered as favorites after losing ATS, but those were outright losses. And they were against the Heat and the Cavs, teams that couldn't crack 100 points. Pacers have had no trouble scoring. And I also just think that Kristaps Porzingis' absence is still a key factor. I mean, that causes some issues for Boston defensively. And by the way, one of those bounce back situations I just mentioned, KP was there. He's not there. So I don't care. I'm doing what's fun. Give me the Pacers. Give me the fun team plus 9. B-Matt, what do you think?
All right, look, to add to your point, something that you didn't mention, which I think only builds to your case, the game started off 12-0 Boston. So, like, if you go ahead and say, like, if we, you know, start the game at that point, you know, you're right. I mean, it's a much different matchup for them. I like it. I think they'll come out. They can score the ball. That much we know. I just hope there's not this letdown of, you know, we should not have collapsed and given away game one. But yeah, like you said, they should come out fired up, you know, knowing that they can play with these guys. And I think it's a matchup that they can, you know, we're seeing points. We know that.
And I didn't even mention with the sharp money on Boston. I get all that.
Yep.
Pacers last 5, 4-1 ATS. Celtics last 5, 1-4 ATS. I'm going with it. All right.
I like it.
Brian Matthews, thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks for having me.
Let's recap our GDD SGP. Brandon Anderson likes Al Horford over 2.5 3-pointers made. I'm riding with the Pacers to make this a game. And Brian Matthews thinks Obi Toppin can help them get there with 10 plus points. Let's go. Over to NHL, the Western Conference Final begins tonight between the Oilers and Stars. Edmonton is the last Canadian team left in this year's playoffs, looking to get back to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2006. Superstar Connor McDavid also looking to capture the first Stanley Cup of his career, as well as bring a cup to a Canadian team, which hasn't happened in 31 years. The last Canadian hockey team to win a cup was Montreal back in 1993. As we bring in our hockey expert, Nick Martin. Okay, Dallas has home ice. They're favored, but this series does not seem straightforward. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Stars are worthy of being a slightly larger favorite, but the common contention is that people are just completely writing off the Oilers here, and I think kind of forgetting about some of the strengths that the Oilers do have. The Stars have gotten here through a much tougher path of teams. They've already knocked off two full-blown cup contenders who were priced as such, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. While the Oilers, everyone's kind of down on them because they took 7 games to get past the Canucks, who looked pretty soft relative to a lot of the playoff teams. But I think one really important note on that is that statistically, the Oilers were pretty unlucky to even get to a 7th game. And one factor that could potentially swing around this series that everyone's kind of already writing off is that Stuart Skinner did play to comparable splits as Jake Oettinger this regular season. And so if I had to bet, obviously I'd be betting on Oettinger being the better goaltender. But goaltending's hard to project. And we were like 3 games into this playoffs, we were talking about how Oettinger was the reason the Stars were struggling. So I wouldn't say that as a rule, we know that Skinner's going to underperform Oettinger. It could go differently. So I think that's one reason that, maybe the Oilers have more of a chance than people think. And then they also just, the most obvious reason, they have Connor McDavid and they have Leon Draisaitl, who are just drastically better than anyone the Stars can offer. So yeah, the Stars have way more depth. They had 8 20-goal scorers this season, and they have 2 defensive pairings that are about as good as you can ask for. They've got a really good shutdown pairing with Tanev and Lindell, and they've got an amazing top pairing with Heiskanen and Thomas Harley. But I still think you kind of got to consider that the Oilers' top stars are just going to dominate when they're on the ice in the series. It's kind of going to come down to how much the depth plays a role. So I like the Stars' chances. I've been huge on the Stars all year, but a lot of people have kind of followed that or have been messaging me saying, like, how much are we smashing Dallas here? I don't know if it's as much a smash as people think. I think you still got to give the Oilers a lot of credit for what they've done to get to this point.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for the overview, but let's focus on game 1 tonight specifically. 8:30 Eastern. What's your approach to betting this game?
Yeah, so I think that the over is worth a look in this game, but the one prop that I think is quite fun that kind of hits on a lot of angles in the series that I like, you can bet the Oilers to win this game and lose the series at plus 475. I think that's a really fun look. This is arguably one of the Oilers' best chances. We've seen teams coming out of game 7 versus rested opponents fare really well in the NHL playoffs. That's been a trend that's been pretty consistent. So you kind of come out of that big game 7 sharp and ready to go. And I think they're honestly kind of on ideal rest here, going from Monday to Thursday. Maybe you want one more off day, whatever it is, but I think it favors the Oilers to have their stars get 2 days off and then get right into this. So I like that. And then the Stars have confirmed they're not going to have rope hints for this game. So I think that's one other factor that's important that works towards this prop, is that this could arguably be the Oilers' best chance to win in this series, is these early games without hints. And in early games, we see higher trends because in large, refs tend to call more power plays, which is a huge advantage for the Oilers, given that they have a historically strong power play. So those are a bunch of reasons why I like the over, and those are a lot of reasons why I think that Oilers to win the first game and lose the series is a fun prop, because I think we could see the Stars' depth pay off later down the line, while the Oilers' stars kind of probably are going to be leaned on to play close to 30 minutes, and that strategy might work at the start, might not work so good at the end. And then also you have to think, if refs are calling things tighter at the beginning, big edge for the Oil. So I think that's kind of a fun way to target the series. I do like the Stars to win the series. I think it's a very reasonable look, but I think that's a really fun option for tonight's game.
Okay, so a lot going on here. Liking a higher scoring affair in game 1. Interesting look to pair the Oilers actually winning the first game, but not winning the series as a whole. And I think that's, when you compare it to other sports too, something to consider in terms of, making it to a game 7, but actually coming out hot in that game 1 in the following series. Now that we have that, though, I do want to do a quick look ahead to Friday, because Rangers are looking to bounce back. They got shut out by Florida in game 1. What's your play before we let you go for game 2 in that series?
Yeah, I actually like the under again in this series. I think there's a pretty good chance that we just see a comparable game to game 1. And if anything, the only part that could have been a lot more high scoring from game one was the first period. There was definitely some goals that were missed in the first. There was a couple breakdowns both ways, and kind of some ugly, like, shooters not really taking advantage and kind of awkward offensive sequences. But after that, it seemed like both teams kind of got their legs and there was just nothing. It was a parking lot in the neutral zone. So I think that we could see that trend continue. In Eastern Conference Final last year, the first game looked comparable to that, and then the rest of the series was just, and this I should note that that series featured the Panthers. The rest of the series just became super low scoring. It was all the same after that, and I think this could just be the same thing. I don't really think much is going to change. And what I thought was really interesting was that you could see both teams. It almost felt like it was being treated like a can't lose game already. I felt like it kind of had that vibe to it, where there wasn't much messing around after the whistles. There wasn't much targeting. There wasn't anything like that. They were both really just committed to winning the game, which was also really interesting from Florida's point of view. So I think we're just going to keep seeing low event hockey. At their core, that's what Paul Maurice wants the Panthers to be. And both goaltenders have just looked so sharp. So I kind of think under 5.5. I was waiting to jump on these later in this series. I think the time is now. I think this series is going to be pretty low event.
Yeah, and it's going to be even more can't lose, especially for the Rangers, who rattled off 7 straight wins to start the playoffs, but are 1-3 since. Okay, Nick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, like the ones you just heard from Nick, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. All right, one more time for the GDD SGP. We got Brandon Anderson betting Al Horford over 2.5 3-pointers made. I like the Pacers to keep this a close game. Brian Matthews thinks Obi Toppin can score 10+. So that is our same game parlay for the show. And that's going to do it for Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks for watching. The show is back tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel.